back to the front page. My name is Andrew McKeever, the managing editor of the Manchester Journal. Pleasure to be back with you. And it's also my pleasure and privilege to have with me today Chris Morrow, who's the co-owner of the Northshire Bookstore, a fixture here in town since 1976 and probably one of the best-known businesses in town, I should think, at this point. And Chris, thank you for making the time to come and be with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, the book publishing business and the book retailing business, I think, is much like the newspaper business, it seems to me, is really on the forefront of a lot of technical change, technological changes that are coming through, new innovations that are happening. And much like us in the newspaper business, we're seeing, the digitalization of things and the internet becoming a much bigger, part of that whole industry. It seems to me between a lot of things that are going on, like Kindle readers, the introduction of the new iPad by Apple, an awful lot of technology is coming in that's going to impact book publishing. And I guess I was wondering, how do you see it? Is all this new technology really going to have a big impact on book publishing and eventually book retailing?
Oh, I think so. I mean, it's pretty clear that it will. The real question is, what's the scope going to be? Right now, ebooks are 2-3% of sales, but they're growing quite rapidly, and a lot of the industry prognosticators are saying within 3 to 5 years it could be 20 to 30% of new book sales going direct to ebooks.
Those would be like electronic books that people would read on a computer screen or something like that?
On a computer screen is still the most common way, but people are also reading a lot on their iPhones and now Kindles, iPads. Barnes & Noble is selling something called a Nook. There's probably going to be a dozen different e-readers on the marketplace by the end of this year. So there's a lot of choice in how to read electronic books. Of course, the vast majority of the business is still going to be physical books. I don't think it's going to go the way of the music industry, where CDs are, a small fraction of sales, and there's virtually no CD standalone stores in the country, whether independent or chain.
Those of us of a certain age fondly remember record stores.
That's right.
Then later on CD shops, but boy, hard to find those anymore.
It is, and we sell CDs, but that's declining rapidly. So consumers have certainly made their choice with that. But the publishing industry, like a lot of old world industries, is resistant to change in a lot of ways. And so you have very large multinational corporations with a lot of vested interest and money tied up in old way of doing things. Excuse me, and that's running up against all these very quickly changing technological innovations and changes, whether it be delivery of books electronically, or just the growth of the internet in general, and being able to buy books and other products online. So the industry is changing whether it wants to or not, and some parts of the industry are being very proactive about that, and other parts are dragging their heels. And so it's certainly going to have a dramatic effect on book selling in the next few years. You see all bricks and mortar bookstores in the country, whether independent or chain, under serious stress. I mean, Borders is hanging on by its fingernails and closing stores by the dozens, and will most likely be out of business within a couple of years.
Wow.
Or just a shadow of its former self. Barnes & Noble is a much better run company. They have a much better balance sheet, but even they are shrinking their stores, closing lots of stores, and refocusing towards digital content. And then, as anyone that's traveled around the country and likes bookstores knows, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of fewer independent bookstores in the country now as there were a decade ago. The American Booksellers Association, which is the national trade organization, used to have well over 5,000 members. Now it has about 1,500, 1,600. So that gives you the scope of the shrinking landscape of independent stores and chain stores. So the the standalone bricks and mortar bookstore is a questionable venture from a lot of vantage points going into the future.
Do you already see a lot of customers asking for ebooks or how they can get downloads or things like that? I mean, I guess I would think that there's still so many people who seem to fondly prefer to have a tangible book in their hands. But are you already seeing customers asking about that, or if you're going to be moving in that direction at some point or another?
We see some, but most of it, unfortunately, bypasses the bookstore. I mean, if you're going to get an electronic book,
Yeah.
and you have an iPhone or a Kindle or whatever your device, there's no need to get the bookstore in the middle of that. We do sell a product that's great for gift giving, which has an ebook code on it that you can send to someone. But that's one of our major challenges is the ebook delivery has been diverted around the bookstore. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in print on demand, which we might get to, because that's one of the only ways that bookstores can take advantage of digital delivery of content in a creative way.
Well, you anticipated my very next question, actually, which was to go to that print-on-demand machine. I see you have a new version of it, or are getting a new smaller unit than the one that you had. But you were, I think, one of the first bookstores in the country to put one of those Espresso machines in, where someone could come in and publish their own book. Tell us a little bit about that, and how has that been going? Has that been growing in popularity, or about the same as it was in the beginning?
It has. No, it's been steadily growing. It's called the Espresso book machine, and we've been testing a beta version for it, the company that makes it. And now we're going to be getting this summer the actual production machine, which is a lot smaller and has been redesigned and upgraded in a lot of ways. So we're very excited about that. And there's really three components to it in terms of what we can print. One is self-publishing, which is what we've been doing primarily. And the whole self-publishing industry has just exploded, which is great because it democratizes publishing.
Well, that's where sort of you get in on the side of the digital history kind of thing, or the right side of that, where someone, let's say, writes a book and they want to get it out there, but a big established publishing house says, "Well, we don't know you, and good luck."
Right.
But now they have this new alternative.
Exactly. And the established publishing houses are doing less and less and less for their authors in terms of marketing and support, going on tour, any of that kind of stuff. So there's more and more reason to do it yourself. You have more control. You get a bigger chunk of the proceeds. You can do as much or as little as you want. And so it's just much easier now to get your book in print, whether it's just 10 or 20 for your family, or you want to put it out there to the marketplace. It's very easy to do now, and it's very affordable. Used to be you needed to go to an offset printer and get hundreds, if not thousands, printed in order to get the per unit cost affordable. And then most people, spent a lot of money and then had hundreds of books in their basement for a long time. And so now you could print as few as you want,
right,
cost effectively. And then if you need more, you just print a few more. So it's very exciting from that point of view, and there's a lot of happy authors, and it's great to be a part of helping authors get their books into print.
How many authors or how many titles have you published so far since you put that machine in?
It's
2 years ago, I think it was? Or?
Yeah, it's close to 100 now.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's growing quickly. So the self-publishing I expect to continue. One of the newer things that we'll be introducing this month actually is, which I've been waiting for a long time, is connecting with Google Books.
Right.
The company that makes the Espresso machine has an arrangement with Google to get public domain books, which public domain meaning books that are out of copyright. So Google has been out there scanning vast libraries, university libraries, all kinds of things, some of which has been controversial because some of the copyright is not clear.
Right,
but
right.
The public domain part is clearly public domain. So we can now access well over 2 million titles. That's public domain that we can download and print right from our Espresso machine on demand.
So if somebody wanted a copy of some book that was published in 1867, that's no longer, it's been out of print for decades.
Right.
They could, search that, pull that out of the Google archives, and you would print out a copy.
Exactly. So, the vast majority of us still like to read a hard copy. And
Yes, we do.
most of that stuff isn't digitized in a way that's formatted for e-readers anyway. But we'll have a link up on our website in a matter of weeks, or people can search now on Google Books and just click the public domain only button to limit your search, and any of those books will be able to print for people. And so there's a vast universe of these books, and it's growing weekly because Google continues to scan many different libraries. And soon they'll be adding books in other languages, the French libraries, Chinese libraries, and we'll be able to print all of that right here. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
And the third component is books that are still in copyright. A lot of publishers have made what we call their backlist, meaning books that are still in print but not new, available in electronic form for us to print. And this is small now, but will be growing over the coming years, so that if people come in the bookstore and we don't have a copy of something, we'll be able to look in this database and say, well, no, we don't have it, but we can print it for you. And this is copyrighted works that we've gotten permission, the publisher has given permission for us to print. And so theoretically, and the end game of all this is within 5 years or 10 years, whatever the time frame it turns out to be, is that anyone with a machine like this should be able to print a book, any book that's ever been published, for a customer if they come in your store.
Wow.
It'll be a few years till we get to that point, but that's really the goal.
Yeah.
Is that digital delivery of content to a machine that allows you to print a book, because the book itself is a proven technology. It's not like the music industry where we went from tape to 8-track to records to cassettes to CDs to new CDs.
It's been around for about 3,000 or 4,000 years.
Right. The technology itself is related to the content and the experience, and so and that's going to last. Whether bookstores last or not, the book itself is going to last, and so. Being able to combine digital delivery and the advantages of that with the proven technology of the book that we all appreciate is exciting way into the future.
Just to get back to the print-on-demand thing for a second, how long does it take for an author? And I would imagine that a lot of the 100 or so titles that you published have probably been local authors or folks from around this area. How long does it take them to go, once they've got a finished product, they have their book, how long does it take to get from that stage into actually having a book that they can sell or hand out to their friends and family?
Well, it really depends on our backlog, but it's usually just a week or two.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, once we have the files where they need to be, then it's quite quick. The time is usually in people really getting the files to where they are happy with them. The cover is often an iterative process to get that where people want it, and then the layout of the book and that sort of thing. But once the files are ready, we can just upload and start printing. Yeah, it's not a...
Now, one of the things you touched upon earlier I thought was kind of interesting, is that whole business about how publishers aren't supporting as many authors in the same way they used to. Now, one of the hallmarks of your store, of course, is all the author events and the readings that writers give when they come to the store and make a personal appearance. So I take it they're not putting as many authors out there on the road as they would have done, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago.
They're really not, and it's declining rapidly, which is unfortunate on a number of levels in terms of us being able to offer things to the community, but also developing authors. You know, it used to be that publishers would hire an author with the view of developing them over a number of books, and it was an investment in a career and building a career over time. That hardly ever happens anymore. So they might lose money on the first book thinking that this author has a lot of great things coming down the line. You know, now it's not like that at all. They when they're acquiring the book, they're thinking about how to market it. So you can have a fantastic book from an author that doesn't know how to market it, and they won't get a contract. And you can have a mediocre book from an author who, say, has a big blog and has a natural constituency where they can sell the book.
Yeah.
They'll get a contract. So the marketing is affecting how the industry is developing.
And then this is all because of what, budgetary pressures, and they just feel like they really have to be careful about where they allocate resources and stuff?
Right. It's definitely all bottom line driven.
So how do they develop new writers? I mean, or what is the game plan for doing that? If you're, you know, a new writer just kind of starting out, and maybe you have one promising book, or maybe won an award or something like that, and kind of the lower levels, how are you supposed to get from point A to point B and become the next, I don't know, Stephen King?
Right. Well, it's tough. People are just trying to discover that. You know, what's the new landscape look like? You know, do you have to get involved in digital activities to do that, or self-publish a book that has merit and then proves itself on a certain level, and then maybe a publisher will pick it up at that point. There have been a number of successes, including very large successes, that were originally self-published, and somebody got a hold of it who was in publishing and read it and realized that it deserved a wider audience and made it happen. So there's more, it's harder, and there's more serendipity to it, and more legwork.
I remember hearing frequently authors commenting on either television or in one forum or another, how, oh my God, I've got to go out on this long road trip, and they're sending me across the country, and I've got to do 80 of these road shows, and oh my God, this is like, how am I going to deal with it? But I suppose that doesn't seem so bad now. Well, a lot
Yeah,
of them
well,
anyway.
it's
I'd probably like to be able to do that.
It's true. You know, it could be a pretty grueling thing, going on tour, city to city, and doing an author readings. But they work. You know, they build audience, and they build interest, and they build media attention, and you know, they build customer base for a specific author. So they what we're doing now is going more directly to authors. Like we had an author just last week, Andrea Rayner, and the publisher didn't send her here. We arranged for her to come here directly and arranged for her lodging and whatnot. It was a great event. We had 50, 75 people there, sold some books. It was a wonderful event, and we're just going to have to do more things like that, working directly with authors. We have an event with Bill McKeever and Jeff Goodall coming up. You know, we did that directly with them. We didn't involve the publishers.
Go through the middleman.
So you know, we're going to have to find ways to do that more and more.
Well, we're talking about it. Are there any authors? Well, you mentioned McKeever and the other fellow coming up. Are there any ones coming up in the next few weeks that you particularly think are going to be ones that the viewers out there might want to know about?
Well, the one that is on our radar is in July 22nd. Judy Collins has a kids book.
Oh, okay.
And she'll be coming to the bookstore in the afternoon to do that. But then she's also going to be doing a concert at the Equinox that night.
Oh boy.
So
mark your calendars, folks.
Yeah, I got to see her down at Book Expo, the big trade show last year, and her same publisher as the Peter Yarrow, who we had the last couple of years, and we're hoping to get him back in the fall. But so it's going to be fun to have her here.
Oh, indeed.
July 22nd.
Yep. Yeah.
So you'll be hearing more about that.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting little bit of news. We have a few minutes left, Chris, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about one organization and one, I'm not sure if movement is the right word or not, that you've been closely affiliated with and associated with over the last couple of years, and that's the whole Local First movement, I guess we can say that. Now, that's an organization that basically tries to encourage or emphasize folks in a particular area to buy locally. They buy from a store that's right in their neighborhood. How has that been going? Has that been successful? And I guess I've also found myself wondering, in the wake of the last couple of years with a pretty stiff economic recession, has that been a benefit? Or has that been a case where people said, yeah, I really want to support my local hardware store or bookstore or whatever because of the recession, or has that been even more difficult?
I think it goes both ways. It's been growing nationwide. This isn't just a Vermont thing. There's active local first or buy local organizations across the country. It started out in Boulder, and it's been very successful ones out in Bellingham, Washington, Austin, Texas, Chicago, and now there's dozens and dozens of organizations across the country. And obviously the local food movement has been developing quite strongly across the country as well. So from a nationwide perspective and even regionally, it's been growing steadily. And Local First Vermont has joined forces with VBSR, which is Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, which is a great statewide organization which focuses on businesses who want to operate their businesses, paying attention to, of course, profits, but also people and planet. And so we're working together to promote the Local First message. And it's as important as ever, if not more so. And I think the economic crisis has shown the vulnerability of relying on large, fragile systems. And the Local First movement isn't against global trade or financial systems. It's more about building local resistance and saying that we need to operate from a position of strength, not weakness. And to do that, we need to have resources locally, and strong retail sector, strong food sector, strong service sector. And the way to do that is to support these businesses which are here locally. And if you can't get what you want or need locally, then obviously you should look elsewhere. But there's a lot of intangibles in what makes a community strong, and that's what we try to do, is draw these connections. Like if you support RK Miles, for instance, some of that money is going to Manchester Elementary School or to Burn Burton or to various nonprofits that they support.
Stays right in the neighborhood.
And then, I think there's people from various businesses sitting on various community boards or school boards, and it's all interconnected. You can't divorce these two. So if you want to save $2 by driving to Rutland to go to Home Depot, or $10, whatever it is, that's an understandable choice, especially in these economic times. But on the other hand, there are costs that aren't dollar and cent costs, at least in the near term. So what we're just trying to do is raise awareness about these issues and really point out that to maintain our strength as communities, we need to be supporting our local businesses, our local farmers, so I think that's been reinforced on the one hand in the economic recession and been challenged on the other hand. Some businesses you can get items cheaper at a certain places, and so if that's the immediate decision, then that's understandable.
Right.
But it's not all black and white.
Yeah.
A strong community is made up of many different elements, and they're all interconnected. And this idea that you could go to the internet and get something really cheap and that doesn't have any other implications is just not true.
Well, I mean, it strikes me that this is really a very, I think, going to be a critical issue going forward for probably societies all over the world, but I'm thinking particularly of American society because, historically we've always sort of grown from the grassroots where, a person maybe worked at a job and the goal was to start their own business and be their own boss and start a small mom and pop type operation. And that's where so many great innovations came from, really. It was from hardworking, ambitious, entrepreneurially oriented people. And when we get into a situation where that becomes so economically difficult, I really wonder what we're losing when that pathway is no longer, or it just seems like that pathway, which is very difficult under the best of circumstances, becomes even more so. And like you're saying, when there's such a cost advantage to shopping at a large, big box store as opposed to the local place, you wonder, where does that lead us to?
Yeah, well, there's some very serious downsides to that. You look at a lot of our economic base is tourism, right? And people come here because it's not like other places. It's not strip malls and all big boxes, and there's a certain quality of life and charm here, and a lot of that is because of our small towns and our natural landscape and the unique stores you can go to and restaurants and everything. And as it gets harder and harder to start a business or run a business, and these places disappear, then that undermines people's reasons for coming here. So again, it's all connected in ways that you don't immediately see, but are true. And so to take the long-term view of it, it's really important to see these connections and support our friends and neighbors in their endeavors, because it comes back to us in many ways.
Right. Well, I know that it always seems that when over the journal we get a thank you letter or some kind of a request, we give some recognition to organizations that have helped out with some kind of charitable effort or initiative. It's always the independent stores that seem to be the ones that are prominently featured. I mean, that's not exclusively the case, but it certainly seems like it's easier when you don't have to have a situation where someone has to check in with the corporate office in some city 3,000 miles away, that those are the folks that really do support a lot of these local charities that, without them, we certainly would be a worse off community, no question.
Absolutely. Well, these are the people that live here and have a vested interest in making this community strong.
Okay.
And so it makes sense.
Well, I guess we're just about out of time, Chris. I want to say thank you very much for being with us today. And Chris Morrow, the co-owner of the Northshire Bookstore. Glad to have you with us, and thank you for sharing all of that with us today. And thank you for watching. This has been The Front Page. My name is Andrew McKeever, Managing Editor of the Manchester Journal. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you again next time.